You look exactly the same.
Oh, too good.
You do look absolutely the same. Must be the bones, I think. Is it true this is your first ever talk show or chat show?
Yes, Michael, you see how irresistible you are?
Yes. Well, who or what persuaded you?
It all go. Did you see the killing fields?
Yes.
Did you see them? Well, that really explains it all. The Khmer Rouge, Pol Pot, who was responsible for the deaths of between 1 and 2 million people in Kampuchea. And since then, the Khmer Rouge, if anybody remembers Pol Pot, who they were, have consistently been recognized by the United Nations as the representatives of the Kampuchean people. So they're still valid, and today they are returning to Kampuchea.
What were you doing there then?
Well, the people of Kampuchea are so terrified at the prospect of the Khmer Rouge returning, and Oxfam, which is one of the few Western institutions that have been in Kampuchea for the last 10 years, became so deeply alarmed that they felt they had to let the world know what was happening. They decided one of the things they'd do to help them with this was to make a documentary, and they asked me to participate in it, and I thought about it. Thought it was something very worthwhile doing, and that's why I went to Kampuchea.
It's a lovely country, isn't it, and lovely people.
Well, I was very surprised. I actually hadn't expected this beauty. It's sort of pink lotus blossoms and temples and little boys on the backs of water buffaloes and emerald green rice fields. It's absolutely lovely. And the people are very gracious and dignified, very colourfully dressed. During the Khmer Rouge, they were only allowed to wear black. And so I was told whatever I did, don't wear black, which is very difficult as I have a completely black wardrobe. But one person said to me, in fact, that it's still very painful for them to see people wearing black.
Let me talk about you now, because you put that over very dramatically. Are you known over there, personally?
I can't say they were crossing the road to get my autograph. No, not exactly. But I went to visit one man who used to be a lecturer at the university, which of course is destroyed now. And I went into this sitting room. He had his television on, rather unusual. I hadn't seen many televisions. Something rather familiar about what was playing. My God, it was Dr. Zhivago, subtitled in Kampuchean.
Not dubbed?
No, not dubbed in Kampuchean. But I don't know where he managed to get it. It was quite remarkable, noble effort, I think. This man said, "We have hope because we believe there is still reason in the world. But if the Khmer Rouge come back to Kampuchea, then we will know there is no reason left in the world."
I was wondering about how much compassion there is left in the world, because there's such a thing, I think, as compassion fatigue, and people are being approached from all angles all the time to give and give.
Yes, this is a different thing. They're not asking for aid, although they should have UN development aid, there's no doubt about that. You see, I think if the Khmer Rouge go back into Kampuchea, we will be knowingly allowing another Holocaust to happen. And I'm sure there are lots of people who would do something, anything, to prevent that happening. And if there are any people who would like to do something, they can ring up Oxfam, it's in the telephone book, or they can go along to the Oxfam shop, and they will be told what is the best thing to do so that Kampuchea doesn't go back to year zero.
Well, now let's talk about you. You mentioned Zhivago, and we've all seen it, and more than once, most of us. I mean, was it a terrible slog in Arctic conditions?
St. Petersburg in midwinter was, in fact, Madrid in a heat wave. And we were all waiting. This multi-million-dollar epic was waiting to be made while we were all sweating away in our furs in 100 degrees heat. Waiting for the snow, which never came. So finally we were saved by the props and set dressers.
You were waiting for snow in Madrid?
No, it was winter. It was winter, and we were told there was going to be snow, and it was a freak heat wave. You got that, wouldn't you? Enjoy that. You must know that very story. And so they covered the whole of the set in mountains of marble dust, and for the long shots the fields were covered in miles and miles of bed sheets. I think the villagers were a little perplexed by this, but we fooled you, didn't we?
Absolutely. Home now is in Wales. So why Wales?
Well, it's very beautiful. I think it's a great privilege, really, if you can choose where to live, to be able to to choose somewhere like that.
I lived there 5 years, and it's a lovely country, but I was wondering what your... I think lifestyle is the word that people use these days. I mean, is it the good life, like the old television series? You bake your own bread?
Yes, I do that, because it's nicer than any bread I can buy.
And do you welcome visitors to your place?
Yes, that's why I went there, because it would be such a nice place to visit me.
And what about the Welsh themselves? I mean, how do you get on?
Very well, I like the Welsh. I like... the further I get away from southern England, in fact, the happier I am.
Far away again, your exotic childhood in India. Do you remember I mentioned at the beginning this that you were tied to a tree by your nanny? I read this. Is it true, and do you remember it?
Well, I did wonder if it was a nightmare. It's so vivid. I mean, have you ever had something you remember from your childhood which was so horrible and awful that,
yes.
That you were not quite sure whether it was real or whether it was a nightmare? I think it was real because it's so vivid. But I sometimes think, I can't believe anybody did that. It must have been a nightmare.
And had you done something naughty? Do you remember the details of it?
Whoever knows who's done anything naughty when they were a kid.
Yes. Have you ever been back?
Yes, I went back for when I made Heat and Dust.
Of course.
Yes, and that was another place that I thought
Didn't go back to
really
the old
liked.
tree, though.
No, I went back to the old home that I was brought up in. I could have been in Timbuktu. I just didn't know where. I didn't recognise anything.
Did you knock hell out of the nanny when you went back?
No, that nanny wrote to me recently. Not that one, perhaps. I think I had a series of them, but I'm going to have to look her up. It's fascinating to look her up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds like a character from the Python story, doesn't she? Going around tying people to trees. Well, there's another story, apocryphal perhaps, about you being expelled from school for telling naughty jokes. It was a convent. I mean, did the nuns feel you were beyond redemption?
I don't know whether they thought I was beyond redemption. I think it was the most incredibly cruel thing to do. Now, who here hasn't told dubious jokes as a child?
Never.
Do you remember the actual joke? How naughty was it?
Do you want me to tell you?
Yes.
It's so pathetic. It really is. Now, let me see. A man and a woman were travelling in a train. The woman gets up and says, "Excuse me, I have to go and powder my nose." She leaves, she comes back. The man gets up and says, "Excuse me, I have to go and powder my nose." He leaves, he comes back. The woman looks at him and says, "Sir, you've left your compact open and the lipstick is showing."
Get out. You got the Oscar for Darling. That was in 1965. Do you remember the emotion of that occasion?
I do remember the emotion. I was so terrified. One of the other things that's left over from school is an absolute terror of hearing my name pronounced in public. In fact, when you did that, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be brought up in front of the assembly for some heinous crime and humiliated.
Spelled again.
But that was, I think, the feeling when I got the Oscar. Oh Christ, I've got to run up there. What am I going to do? And I burst into tears, I think, to my shame.
Well, that's better than what Barry described. I think it's rather touching. You didn't like the States very much while you were there, did you?
Oh, well, the States is a big place.
You made some good films in America, didn't you? I mean, you...
Some good films, yes.
Yeah.
I think so, yes.
What about American men?
Golly, I didn't know I was going to ask that.
All of them.
Right.
All of them.
Oh,
You know
well,
them
a few
all,
of them
course,
kept me
really, so-
there. That's probably the reason I stayed. So they couldn't be all that bad.
It's lovely to see you blush. It's very I know, now, for an actress who, as I said earlier, was the face of an era, which you certainly were, does the thought of an aging process bother you?
I tell you what bothers me, it's people asking me if the thought of the aging process bothers me. I think that's been the greatest worry of all.
You've been asked it before?
Once or twice, yes.
Does the thought of the aging process bother you?
If I could get avoid that one.
Is it a label that you're tired of, then?
What, the 60s or the aging?
The 60s thing.
It's strange to be perceived as a past part of your life. I mean, like the person you were in the 60s. You can imagine if everybody saw you or you or you as that person that you were in the 60s and was really surprised that you were the person you are in the 80s. It's very odd, because you are what you are now.
It's been marvellous to meet you and enjoyed this conversation, and sorry about the questions. Julie Christie, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.